On her wedding night to the most powerful duke in England, Lady Annalise expected anything but rejection. As she stood in the candlelit bedchamber, her new husband, the man every woman in society desired, looked at her with those storm-gray eyes and said words that would haunt her. "Tonight, you sleep alone." But this was no ordinary rejection. Because the Duke of Blackwater wasn't who he claimed to be, and the wedding night refusal? It was the only thing keeping her alive. 3 months earlier, Annalise's world had begun to crumble. Late autumn in 1825 painted Northwood Manor in shades of decay. The grand estate that had once hosted lavish balls and garden parties now stood quiet, its windows dark, its gardens overgrown. Annalise Dortney, just 20 years old, walked through rooms that echoed with memories of better days. She had been the diamond of the London season only 2 years ago. Every eligible bachelor had sought her hand. Her dance card was always full. Her father's fortune had seemed endless. But fortunes can disappear faster than morning fog. Bad investments, gambling debts, and a business partner who fled to France with half their capital left Lord Dortney drowning in obligation. The suitors vanished overnight. Funny how quickly admiration turns to avoidance when the money runs dry. Annalise learned a hard truth that autumn. In their world, a beautiful face meant nothing without a substantial dowry behind it. The servants had been let go months ago, all except old Mrs. Henshaw, who refused to leave. Annalise now did her own mending, helped in the kitchen, and tried to ignore the leak in the drawing-room ceiling. Her father barely left his study anymore. He aged 10 years in 10 months, his face gray, his hands shaking whenever the post arrived. More bills. More threats. More doors closing. Then Silas Finch came calling. Annalise would never forget that October afternoon. She was in the parlor, attempting to darn a stocking when she heard the knock. Sharp, insistent, the sound of someone who expected to be answered. Mrs. Henshaw showed him in, her disapproval written across her wrinkled face. Finch was a moneylender, the kind of man her father would never have acknowledged in their prosperous days. Now he sat in their best chair like he owned it. Perhaps he did. He was a thin man with calculating eyes and fingers stained with ink. He spoke with false politeness, the kind that made Annalise's skin crawl. Her father had borrowed heavily from him over the past year. The debts had compounded, interest upon interest, until the sum was staggering. Finch had come to collect, and he had a proposal. "I have a business associate," Finch said, his voice smooth as oil. "A good man, hard-working. He's in need of a wife. A respectable wife from good family. Your daughter would suit his purposes admirably." He smiled, showing too many teeth. "Marry her to him, and we'll consider your debts settled. All of them." Annalise felt the blood drain from her face. Her father looked like he might be sick. "Your associate," Lord Dortney said slowly. "Who is he? What family?" He was grasping at straws, hoping for some minor gentleman, some distant cousin of someone respectable. Finch's smile widened. "He's a stonemason, my lord. Name of Liam Hale. Works with his hands. But honest work, respectable work. He has a cottage, steady income. Your daughter would want for nothing. A stonemason. A common laborer." Annalise's world tilted sideways. Her father was being asked to marry her, a baron's daughter, to a man who carved rocks for a living. It was unthinkable. It was social suicide. It was the final, absolute proof of how far they had fallen. "This is absurd," Annalise said, her voice shaking. "Father, you cannot seriously consider this." But when she looked at him, she saw the defeat in his eyes. He was considering it. He was actually considering selling his daughter to settle his debts. Finch stood, adjusting his coat. "I'll give you 3 days to decide. After that, I'll be forced to take other measures. The bailiffs are not as patient as I am, my lord." He tipped his hat to Annalise with mock courtesy. "Good day, Lady Annalise. I do hope we'll be seeing more of each other soon." After he left, father and daughter sat in terrible silence. Finally, Lord Dortney spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "Annalise, I'm so sorry. I've failed you. I've failed your mother's memory. I've destroyed everything." Tears ran down his weathered cheeks. "But if we don't accept, they'll take the manor. They'll take everything. I'll end up in debtor's prison, and you'll have nothing. Not even a roof over your head." Annalise felt something crack inside her chest. She thought of her mother, dead these 5 years, who had taught her to be graceful, accomplished, perfect, ready for a brilliant marriage to a worthy gentleman. She thought of the life she was supposed to have, the life that was now impossible. "Will he be cruel?" she asked quietly. "This stonemason, will he hurt me?" Her father looked bewildered. "Finch says he's respectable." "I don't know, Annalise. I don't know anything anymore." 3 days later, Annalise stood in a small parish church wearing a simple dress, no veil, no flowers, no guests except her father and Mrs. Henshaw, who wept quietly in the back pew. The vicar looked uncomfortable performing such an odd ceremony. The groom arrived alone. Annalise's first sight of Liam Hale confused her. She had expected rough, perhaps crude, certainly common. But the man who stood beside her was none of those things entirely. Yes, his hands were calloused and strong. Yes, his clothes were plain, a working man's best. But his bearing was oddly refined. He stood straight, moved with unexpected grace. And his eyes, storm gray, intelligent, watching everything. When he looked at her, she saw something she couldn't name. Not desire, not triumph, not even satisfaction. Something closer to regret. The vows were spoken like death sentences. She stumbled over the words. He said them clearly, firmly, as if making a business contract. When he placed the ring on her finger, simple gold, their hands touched. His were warm, calloused but gentle. The vicar pronounced them man and wife. Liam did not kiss her. He simply nodded, once, and turned toward the door. The journey to his cottage was silent. Annalise sat beside him in a simple cart, her trunk of belongings rattling in the back. She watched the countryside pass, each mile taking her further from everything she had known. Further from hope. She had thought marriage beneath her station would be her greatest shame. She had no idea she had just married the most dangerous man in England. And that rejection she would face on her wedding night? That would be the beginning of everything. The cottage sat at the edge of a small village, surrounded by woods that seemed to press in from all sides. It was sturdy, well built, with a thatched roof and a stone chimney. Annalise had never lived anywhere so small. Her childhood bedroom had been larger than this entire dwelling. One main room served as kitchen and living space. A tiny bedroom barely fit a narrow bed. A workshop out back where Liam kept his tools and stone. He carried her trunk inside without ceremony, set it by the bed, and turned to face her. This was the moment she had been dreading. The wedding night. Whatever came next. But Liam simply gestured to the bedroom. "That's yours," he said. "I'll sleep out here." Then he walked outside, leaving her standing alone in the fading light. That first night, Annalise lay awake on the unfamiliar bed, listening to the sounds of the countryside. Owls hooting. Wind in the trees. So different from London, from the manor, from everything she knew. She had expected demands. She had braced herself for violation. Instead, she got abandonment. Somehow that felt worse. Even her husband, a common laborer who should have been grateful for a wife so far above his station, didn't want her. The days that followed established a pattern. Liam left before dawn. She would wake to find him already gone. only the faint smell of bread and tea suggesting he had been there at all. He returned after dark, ate whatever simple meal she had managed to prepare, and spoke barely a dozen words before retiring to his bedroll by the fire. He was a ghost in her life. Present but absent. There but not there. Annalise had never done manual labor in her life. At the manor, servants had done everything. Now she struggled with tasks that seemed impossibly difficult. Hauling water from the well left her arms aching. Keeping the fire going required constant attention. Cooking over an open flame was nothing like instructing a cook on menu preferences. She burned soup. She ruined bread. Her hands, once soft and perfect for playing piano, developed blisters and calluses. But Liam never complained. He ate whatever she made without comment. And despite his distance, she began noticing small kindnesses. Wood already split and stacked by the door in the morning. A loose board on the step quietly repaired. Once, she lost a ribbon, her last pretty thing from her old life. She found it days later, cleaned and pressed, left on the kitchen table. He never mentioned it. She never thanked him. But something shifted slightly between them. From the small window, she sometimes watched him work. There was a church in the village being renovated, and Liam worked on the stone facing. She expected to see brutish labor, hammer and chisel wielded roughly. Instead, she saw artistry. His movements were precise, almost delicate. He would study a stone for long minutes before making a single cut. The way he worked reminded her of how her music teacher had approached the pianoforte. With respect. With understanding. With something like love. One afternoon, she walked to the village for supplies. The other women stared. They knew who she was, this fine lady married to Liam Hale. Their eyes held curiosity and judgment in equal measure. One older woman, Mrs. Cooper, actually spoke to her. "Your husband's a strange one," she said, not unkindly. "Keeps to himself. But he's honest. Works harder than any man I know. You could have done worse. It was meant as comfort." It didn't feel comforting. 3 weeks into the marriage, a storm came. The wind howled like something alive, battering the cottage. Rain came in sheets. Annalise huddled by the fire, trying not to show her fear. Then a shutter tore loose, banging violently against the wall. She ran to the window, struggling with the latch, the wind tearing at her hands. Suddenly Liam was there. She hadn't heard him come in. He reached past her, strong arms securing the shutter from inside, his body shielding hers from the spray of rain. For a moment they were pressed close, closer than they had been since the church. She could feel the warmth of him, smell the rain and stone dust on his clothes. Then he stepped back, and the distance returned. But he didn't leave. He built up the fire, put a kettle on for tea. They sat in chairs across from each other, the storm raging outside, an odd peace settling inside. Annalise found herself speaking. "Thank you for fixing that." He nodded. Then, gathering courage she didn't know she possessed, she asked, "Why do you stay away so much? Why did you even want a wife if you have no use for one?" Something flickered in his storm-gray eyes. Pain, maybe. Or guilt. "It's complicated," he said finally. "This arrangement, it wasn't what either of us wanted. But it was necessary." His voice, she realized, had an accent that didn't quite fit. It was refined around the edges, like he was trying to sound common but couldn't quite manage it. Her eyes fell on a small shelf near his bedroll. Books. She hadn't noticed them before. She stood, moving closer, curiosity overcoming propriety. Poetry, Keats, Shakespeare, and something else. A thick volume in Latin. Architectural principles and classical design. She pulled it down, staring at the Latin text. "You read Latin?" He was beside her quickly, too quickly, taking the book from her hands. But not roughly. "My father was a schoolmaster," he said quietly. "He taught me before he died. Old habits." He placed the book back carefully. "A man can work with his hands and still have a mind, Lady Analyse." Lady Analyse. He always called her that, with a formality that seemed odd coming from a husband. From a man who should have claimed the privilege of her first name. She looked at him, really looked at him. The intelligence in those gray eyes. The way he held himself. The words he chose. "Who are you?" she asked softly. Really? For a moment, she thought he might tell her. She saw the war in his expression, the desire to speak fighting against some prohibition. Then he stepped back, the walls slamming down again. "I'm your husband," he said. "That's all that matters." He moved to his bedroll. The storm should pass by morning. Get some sleep. But Analyse couldn't sleep. She lay in the narrow bed, mind racing. A stonemason who read Latin and Shakespeare. Who moved like a gentleman. Who spoke with an education that didn't match his station. Who had somehow convinced a moneylender to erase enormous debts in exchange for marrying a ruined baron's daughter. Nothing made sense. The next week, a traveling peddler came through the village. Analyse bought thread and a few necessities. The peddler also sold newspapers from London, weeks old but still news to the countryside. Analyse bought one, hungry for any connection to her former world. That night, while Liam was still at work, she read by candlelight. Parliament proceedings. Society gossip. A scandal involving a marquis and an actress. And then, on the third page, an article that made her heart stop. The Duke of Blackwater, Lord Alastair Beaumont, is now presumed dead after his yacht failed to return from a crossing 6 months past. Despite extensive searches, no wreckage or survivors have been found. His cousin, Lord Geoffrey Beaumont, has formally assumed the title and estates. A memorial service was held at St. Paul's Cathedral, attended by the Prince Regent himself. The Duke, aged 30, was unmarried and leaves no direct heirs. He is remembered as one of London's most eligible bachelors and a skilled horseman. 6 months ago. Right around the time Finch started pressing her father's debts. Right around the time Liam Hale appeared in their lives. Analyse's hands shook as she reread the article. The Duke of Blackwater. One of the most powerful nobles in England. Presumed dead. Body never found. She remembered finding Liam's coat muddy a few days ago, planning to clean it. She had checked the pockets first, found a handkerchief, some coins, and something else. A ring. Heavy gold with an elaborate crest. She had looked at it, confused, then put it back, assuming it was some family heirloom from his schoolmaster father. Now she went to where his coat hung. Pulled out the ring with trembling fingers. Held it to the candlelight. The crest showed a bear, snarling, with a spear behind it. And words in Latin around the edge. Fortitudine vincimus. By courage we conquer. She had seen that crest before, in society. It was the Beaumont family crest. The crest of the Dukes of Blackwater. Her husband, the stonemason who read Latin, who moved like nobility, who had appeared from nowhere with enough influence to erase crushing debts, was wearing the signet ring of a duke presumed drowned 6 months ago. Analyse's mind reeled. It was impossible. It was insane. But the pieces were fitting together into a picture that terrified her. If Liam was somehow connected to the Duke. If he had something to do with that disappearance. Or if he was, impossible as it seemed, something even more unthinkable. She heard his footsteps outside. Quickly, she shoved the ring back into the coat pocket, hid the newspaper under her mattress, and tried to compose her face. But when he entered, he stopped immediately. Those sharp gray eyes studied her. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Nothing," she lied. "Just tired." He didn't believe her. She could see that. But he didn't press. He simply nodded and moved to prepare his bedroll. Annalise watched him with new eyes. The way he moved. The vigilance in his posture. The way his eyes constantly scanned, even in the safety of their cottage. That wasn't the caution of a laborer worried about work tomorrow. That was the watchfulness of a man expecting danger. Of someone hunted. Before she could decide whether to confront him, whether to demand truth, danger arrived at their door. 3 days later, in the cold morning light, they had a visitor. Silas Finch rode up on a fine horse, looking pleased with himself. Annalise was drawing water from the well. Liam was in his workshop. The sound of hoofbeats brought them both out. Finch dismounted, smiling that oily smile. "Liam," he called out. "We need to talk." But Liam's entire body had gone rigid. His hands, relaxed a moment before, were now clenched. His face had transformed from the quiet stonemason into something hard and dangerous. "You were not to come here," Liam said, his voice low and deadly. The common accent was completely gone. This was the voice of command, of authority, of someone used to being obeyed. Finch laughed. "Circumstances change, Your Grace." "Your Grace." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Annalise felt the world tilt. Finch turned to her, enjoying the shock on her face. "Has your husband not told you who he really is, Lady Annalise? Allow me to introduce you properly." His smile was cruel now. "This is Alastair Beaumont, Duke of Blackwater. Very much alive, despite what his dear cousin Geoffrey believes. And you, my dear, are actually a duchess. Congratulations." Annalise couldn't breathe. The world had narrowed to those 2 words. "Your Grace." She looked at Liam, at this man she had married, this stranger who had shared her home for weeks. He wasn't looking at her. His eyes were locked on Finch with an intensity that made the air feel dangerous. "Get off my property," Liam said. "No, not Liam. Alastair. The Duke of Blackwater. A man who was supposed to be dead. We had an agreement. You stay away. You keep your mouth shut. That was the arrangement." Finch spread his hands in mock innocence. "The arrangement was made under different circumstances, Your Grace. Before I knew that your dear cousin Geoffrey was becoming so very interested in finding proof of your death. Before I knew he was willing to pay handsomely for such proof. He pulled out a flask, took a drink. He's offering £5,000 for confirmation that you drowned. Can you imagine? £5,000 just to say yes, the Duke is definitely dead." Annalise watched something deadly flash across Alastair's face. This was not the quiet man who fixed her shutters and left ribbons on tables. This was someone else entirely. Someone capable of violence. "And what did you tell him?" The words came out soft, but they carried threat. "Nothing yet," Finch said quickly. "I'm a businessman, Your Grace. I go where the profit is best. Right now, I'm thinking you might outbid him. Especially since I hold such interesting information. Like the fact that you're alive. And married. And hiding in the countryside pretending to be a stonemason." He glanced at Annalise. "Does she know why you married her? Does she know she was just a convenient disguise?" The words hit Annalise like a physical blow. A disguise. That's what she was. That's all she had ever been. Not a wife. Not even a person. Just camouflage for a duke running from something. Alastair took a step toward Finch. "Name your price and leave." But Finch was enjoying himself too much. "See, that's the interesting part. Geoffrey isn't just looking for proof you're dead. He's actively ensuring it. Those men he's hired? They're not investigators. They're hunters. And they're very good at their job." He wants to make sure that if you survived the yacht, you don't survive much longer. He paused. But I'm thinking, maybe there's a better play here. Maybe you're worth more alive than dead. Maybe you could use an ally. Someone who knows things. Like the fact that Jeffrey paid Captain Fowler to scuttle your yacht. Like the fact that there's a witness who saw the whole thing. Annalise's mind was reeling. Assassination. This wasn't just about a title or an estate. Someone had tried to murder the man she had married, had tried to drown him, and now was hunting him to finish the job. She thought of the newspaper article, the memorial service, the Prince Regent in attendance, mourning a man who was standing right in front of her. Who's the witness? Alistair demanded. Finch smiled. First mate named Thomas Paine. Fowler got drunk one night and confessed the whole thing. How Jeffrey paid him to sabotage the yacht during the storm. Make it look like an accident. Paine was smart enough to keep his mouth shut and disappear, but I found him. I find everyone eventually. He took another drink. So here's my offer. I give you the witness. You use him to expose Jeffrey. You reclaim your title. And I get, shall we say, £10,000 for my trouble. Plus a position in your household. Something respectable. You're a blackmailer and a criminal, Alistair said flatly. I'm a man who recognizes opportunity, Finch corrected. And right now, the opportunity is helping you, Your Grace. Because Jeffrey's men are getting close. They've been asking questions in the villages. Showing your portrait. Someone's going to recognize you eventually, educated speech and Latin books aside. You need to act soon, or you'll be dead for real. Annalise found her voice, though it shook. Why? She looked at Alistair, this stranger, this duke. Why did Jeffrey try to kill you? Why does he want you dead so badly? It was Finch who answered. Money, my dear. Always money. The Blackwater estates are worth a fortune. Lands, investments, properties all over England. Jeffrey was the heir, but a distant one. He's been in debt for years, gambling and spending like he already had the title. When his creditors started demanding payment, he got desperate. Dead cousin means instant wealth. It's quite simple, really. Alistair's jaw clenched. Get to your point, Finch. What do you want right now? Just checking on my investment, Finch said cheerfully. Making sure you're still alive. Still useful. I'll be in touch about the witness. You might want to start planning your resurrection, Your Grace. Jeffrey's hosting a grand feast at Blackwater Castle in 2 weeks. Celebrating his first year as Duke. All the northern lords will be there. Quite the occasion. Would be even more memorable if the dead Duke showed up, wouldn't it? He mounted his horse. Oh, and Your Grace? You might want to tell your wife the truth. She deserves to know why she's really here. He rode off, leaving silence in his wake. Annalise and Alistair stood in the yard, the morning sun bright and cold. Finally, she turned to face him. Who are you? Her voice cracked. What is your real name? He met her eyes, and she saw exhaustion there. Exhaustion and something like guilt. Alistair Beaumont, he said quietly. Duke of Blackwater. Or I was, until my cousin tried to drown me 6 months ago. And me? What am I? Why did you marry me? The anger was building now, hot and fierce. Was I really just a disguise? Just some convenient prop in whatever game you're playing? He flinched. At first, yes. The honesty was brutal. I needed to disappear. A single man traveling alone draws attention. A married man, settled in a village, working an honest trade? That's invisible. When Finch told me about your father's debts, about you, it seemed like a solution. I could help your family and gain the cover I needed. A solution, she repeated. I was a solution. My father sold me to settle his debts, and you bought me like a horse or a piece of furniture. Just something useful. Tears burned in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Did you even consider that I was a person? That I had feelings? That being married to someone who treats you like you're invisible might hurt? I considered it, he said softly. That's why I stayed away. That's why I kept my distance. I thought it would be easier for you if we didn't. He trailed off. This was never supposed to be a real marriage, Annalise. It was supposed to be temporary. A few months until I could gather evidence, until I could prove what Jeffrey did. Then I would reclaim my title, and you would be free. Wealthy, compensated for your trouble, but free. Free, she said bitterly. You mean divorced, disgraced, a woman abandoned by her common husband. That's what you were planning. I was planning to make you a duchess, he said. To give you everything you lost when your father's fortune collapsed. Title, wealth, position, everything you deserved. I didn't deserve to be lied to, she shot back. I didn't deserve to be used. She wrapped her arms around herself. And now? What happens now that Finch knows? What happens when these hunters find us? Before Alistair could answer, Annalise heard it. The sound of horses. Multiple horses, moving fast. Alistair heard it too. His entire body went on alert. Get inside, he said urgently. Now. What? Now, Annalise. She ran for the cottage, but she didn't go inside. She stopped at the door, watching. 3 men burst through the tree line on horseback. They weren't dressed like farmers or travelers. They wore dark clothes, and Annalise could see weapons. Swords. Pistols. They looked like soldiers, but worse. Harder. Colder. The lead rider pulled up, looking at Alistair with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Liam Hale, he called out. Or should I say, Your Grace? Lord Geoffrey sends his regards. Alistair moved, and it was like watching someone transform. The stonemason vanished completely. He grabbed a hammer from his workbench, hefted it with the ease of long practice, and his stance shifted into something that spoke of training, of combat, of a man who knew exactly how to fight. Tell Geoffrey, Alistair said, his voice carrying command and contempt, that the Duke of Blackwater is not as easy to kill as he imagined. The lead rider laughed. We'll see about that. He drew his sword. The other 2 did the same. 3 armed men against 1 with a hammer. Annalise wanted to scream, to run, to do something. But she was frozen, watching in horror. They attacked together, coordinated, professional. These were not thugs. These were trained killers. But Alistair was something else entirely. He moved like water, like shadow. The hammer swung, and the first man's sword went flying. An elbow to the face sent him sprawling. The second man lunged, but Alistair was already moving, using the man's momentum against him, sending him crashing into the third. It was brutal and efficient. No wasted movement. No hesitation. This was not a gentleman's duel with rules and honor. This was survival. Within moments, all 3 men were disarmed, 2 on the ground groaning, 1 clutching a broken wrist. Alistair stood over them, breathing hard, the hammer still in his hand. There was blood on his knuckles. A cut on his cheek. He leaned down to the lead rider. Tell Geoffrey the Duke of Blackwater is not dead. Tell him I'm coming for him. Tell him I know everything he did, and I have witnesses. Tell him his time is running out. He straightened. Now get out of here before I forget that I'm supposed to be a civilized man. They scrambled to their horses and rode off, leaving the yard in chaos. Alistair dropped the hammer, and Annalise saw his hands shaking. Not from fear, she realized. From adrenaline. From rage. From the effort of holding back. She stepped out of the cottage doorway. He turned to face her, and she saw it all in his expression. The truth of who he was. What his life had become. They will be back, he said quietly. More of them. Better prepared. Geoffrey knows I'm alive now. He knows where I am. He looked at the cottage, at this small piece of peace they had built. We can't stay here. It's not safe. Annalise's mind was spinning. Assassins. Attempted murder. A cousin willing to kill for a title. And her, caught in the middle of it all. A prop. A disguise. A solution to someone else's problem. She should have been terrified. She was terrified. But underneath the fear, something else was growing. Anger. Determination. A refusal to be a victim anymore. Where will we go? She asked. Her voice was steadier than she expected. He looked at her, surprise flickering across his face. North. To Northgate Manor. Sir Robert Fairfax is an old friend. One of the few I can trust. We can gather allies there, plan our next move. He paused. Annalise, you don't have to come. I can send you somewhere safe. Your father's manor, or, I'm your wife, she interrupted. She didn't know why she said it. Part of her hated him for the lies, for using her. But another part recognized something. They were bound together now, whether either of them liked it. For better or worse. That's what the vows said. And right now, it's definitely worse. So where you go, I go. Something shifted in his storm-gray eyes. Respect, maybe. Or gratitude. They'll try to kill you too, he warned. Anyone connected to me is in danger. They already tried, she pointed out. Or they would have, if they'd succeeded with you. She straightened her shoulders. Besides, I'm not the useless society girl I was 3 months ago. I can haul water. I can keep a fire going. I can survive. She met his gaze. And I can keep up. For the first time since she'd known him, Alistair smiled. Really smiled. It transformed his face, made him look younger, less burdened. Then we leave within the hour. Pack light. Only what you can carry. We'll be traveling rough. As Annalise moved to gather her few belongings, she heard him mutter behind her, I really didn't want you involved in this. She turned back. He was looking at the cottage, at the blood on the ground, at the evidence of violence in their peaceful yard. I thought I could keep you separate. Keep you safe. You thought wrong, she said simply. Now stop apologizing and tell me what I need to know to stay alive. And so began the next chapter. The chapter where Lady Annalise Dortney stopped being a victim and started being a survivor. Where the Duke of Blackwater stopped running and started fighting back. Where two strangers, bound by lies and circumstance, began the journey that would either save them both or destroy them completely. They left the cottage within the hour, just as Alistair had promised. Annalise wore her simplest dress, sturdy boots that had seen weeks of hard use, and carried a small pack with a change of clothes and her mother's locket. Everything else, the remnants of her old life, stayed behind. Alistair moved with military precision, gathering supplies, weapons she hadn't known he possessed. From beneath the floorboards of his workshop, he pulled out a long bundle wrapped in oilcloth. Inside were 2 swords, a pistol, ammunition, and a purse heavy with gold coins. Not the savings of a stonemason. The emergency funds of a duke. How long have you been planning this? Annalise asked, watching him strap one sword to his belt. Since the day I arrived here, he said. I always knew I might have to run again. I just hoped I'd have more time. He handed her a small knife in a leather sheath. "Keep this on you. If anyone gets close and I'm not there, you go for the eyes or the throat. Don't hesitate. Don't think. Just act." Annalise took the knife with trembling hands. 3 months ago, the most dangerous thing she'd handled was a sharp embroidery needle. Now she was being taught where to stab a man to kill him. The world had turned completely upside down. They traveled on foot, avoiding roads where possible. Alistair explained that Geoffrey's men would be watching the main routes, looking for travelers matching their description. So they went through forests, across fields, following deer paths and streams. It was grueling. Annalise's legs ached within the first hour. By midday, her feet were screaming. But she didn't complain. She had said she could keep up, and she meant it. Alistair set a hard pace but checked on her regularly. He would slow when the terrain got difficult, offer his hand over rough patches, make sure she drank water. He didn't coddle her, but he didn't abandon her either. They were partners in survival now, and he treated her accordingly. That first night, they camped in a dense thicket, no fire for fear of being spotted. They ate dried meat and hard bread in silence. Annalise's whole body hurt. Her dress was torn in 3 places. Her hands were scratched and bleeding from pushing through brambles. She had never been so exhausted in her entire life. "You did well today," Alistair said quietly, breaking the silence. "Better than most trained soldiers on their first forced march." "I don't feel like I did well," Annalise admitted. "I feel like I'm dying." He smiled slightly. "That's how you know you're doing it right. Tomorrow will be harder. Your muscles will have stiffened overnight. But the day after that will be easier. The body adapts quickly when it has to." Annalise looked at him in the fading light. "Where did you learn all this? Dukes don't usually know how to fight 3 armed men or march through wilderness." "My father believed in practical education," Alistair said. "He had me trained by a former cavalry officer. Riding, swordsmanship, shooting, survival. He said a man who might command others in war should know what he was asking of them." His voice grew distant. "He died when I was 19. A riding accident. After that, Geoffrey started circling. Even then, even before I inherited, he wanted what I had. Did you know he was dangerous? I knew he was ambitious and reckless. I didn't know he was capable of murder." Alistair's jaw tightened. "I should have seen it. Should have been more careful. Instead, I trusted family. I thought blood meant something. I was wrong." Annalise understood that kind of betrayal. Her father had sold her to save himself. Geoffrey had tried to murder his own cousin for money. Family wasn't always safety. Sometimes it was the most dangerous thing of all. The second day was worse, just as Alistair had predicted. Annalise could barely walk when she woke. Every muscle screamed. But Alistair showed her how to stretch, how to keep moving until the stiffness faded. And slowly, painfully, she did adapt. Her body remembered it was young and strong, even if her life had been soft. By afternoon, she found a rhythm. Step after step. Mile after mile. She stopped thinking about the pain and just moved. They crossed a river at dusk, the water shockingly cold. Annalise slipped on the rocks, and Alistair caught her, his arm around her waist, steadying her. For a moment they stood there, the current rushing around their legs, his face close to hers. She saw concern in his eyes. And something else. Something that made her heart beat faster. "Careful," he said softly. "We can't afford an injury." "I'm fine," she said, but she didn't pull away immediately. Neither did he. Then the moment passed, and they finished crossing, both of them suddenly awkward. The third night brought rain. Cold, relentless, autumn rain that soaked through their clothes within minutes. They found shelter under a rocky overhang, barely enough room for both of them. Alistair built a tiny fire in the back, just enough for a little warmth. They huddled close, shivering, water dripping from their hair. "I'm sorry," Alistair said. "This isn't the life you signed up for." Annalise laughed, surprising herself. "I signed up to be the wife of a stonemason. Instead, I'm the wife of a duke, running from assassins, sleeping in caves. I'd say nothing about this is what I signed up for." She looked at him. "But you know what? I'm not sorry. Not really. At the cottage, I was still in a cage. Just a different cage than the manor. Here, right now, freezing and exhausted and terrified? I'm more alive than I've ever been." He studied her face. "You're extraordinary, you know that? Most women of your background would have collapsed the first day. Or demanded I take you back. Or screamed and cried and made everything harder." "I did cry," Annalise admitted. "Yesterday, when you went to scout ahead. I sat down and cried for 10 minutes. Then I stood up and kept walking. Because crying doesn't change anything, does it? We're still being hunted. We still have to keep moving. Tears are a luxury I can't afford right now." Alistair reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he brushed a wet strand of hair from her face. "When this is over, when it's safe, you can cry all you want. I'll sit with you. I'll listen. I'll try to make up for dragging you into this nightmare. And if it's not over? If we don't make it? Then at least we tried," he said simply. "At least we fought back. That's more than Geoffrey gave me on that yacht. More than he gave either of us the choice to do." The rain pounded outside their shelter. Annalise was so cold she couldn't stop shaking. Alistair hesitated, then made a decision. He moved closer, wrapping his coat around both of them, pulling her against his chest. His body heat was immediate and blessed. Annalise knew she should protest. They were barely more than strangers. But she was too cold and too tired to care about propriety. "Thank you," she whispered. His arms tightened slightly around her. "Sleep if you can. I'll keep watch. You need sleep too. I'll manage. I've done longer marches with less rest." His voice was gentle. "Besides, someone has to make sure you don't freeze to death. Your father would never forgive me." Annalise closed her eyes, listening to his heartbeat. Steady, strong, alive. "My father sold me for his debts. I'm not sure he gets an opinion anymore." She paused. "But I'd hate to disappoint Mrs. Henshaw. She liked you, you know. Said any man who fixed shutters without being asked was a good man." She felt him laugh quietly. "Mrs. Henshaw was the terrifying one. I was more afraid of her than your father. She was rather protective." Annalise was getting drowsy, the warmth and exhaustion pulling her under. "Alistair." "Yes. I'm still angry at you. For the lies. For using me. I know. You have every right to be. But I understand why you did it. And I don't hate you." She let out a long breath. "I thought I would. I thought when I found out the truth, I would hate you. But I don't." His hand moved to her hair, stroking it gently. "Sleep, Annalise. We have a long way to go tomorrow." She slept, and for the first time since leaving the cottage, she felt safe. It made no sense. They were being hunted, sleeping in a cave, cold and wet and in constant danger. But wrapped in his arms, listening to his heartbeat, she felt protected. Whatever else Alistair was, whatever lies he'd told, he was keeping her alive. And somewhere along this brutal journey, she'd started to trust him. The fourth day dawned clear and cold. They made better time, the terrain becoming more open. Alistair taught her as they walked. How to read the sun for direction. how to identify which plants were edible, how to move quietly, how to watch for signs of other travelers. He was patient, and Annalise discovered she was a quick learner when her life depended on it. "You're stronger than you think, Annalise," he said as they climbed a steep hill. "Most people never find out what they're capable of. They live safe, comfortable lives and never need to know. You could have been one of them. Should have been. Instead, you're here, keeping pace with me, learning to survive. That takes courage." "I don't feel courageous. I feel terrified most of the time." "That's what courage is," he said. "Being terrified and doing it anyway. Bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's moving forward despite the fear." He reached the top of the hill and offered her his hand. She took it, and he pulled her up beside him. The view took her breath away. They could see for miles. Rolling hills, forests turning autumn colors, and in the distance, mountains. The landscape was wild and beautiful and utterly unlike anything she'd seen from a drawing room window. "It's magnificent," she breathed. "This is the North," Alistair said. "Harder land. Harder people. But honest. Real. When we get to Northgate Manor, Sir Robert will help us. He's a good man. Loyal. He'll give us sanctuary while we plan our next move. And then we go to Blackwater. We confront Geoffrey. We expose what he did." His voice hardened. "And we take back what's mine." Annalise looked at him, this man who was her husband in name but had become something more on this journey. A partner. An ally. Maybe even a friend. "What's ours?" she corrected. "I'm the Duchess of Blackwater, remember? Whether I wanted the title or not, it's mine now. So when we go to face Geoffrey, we do it together." He looked at her for a long moment. "A drawing room is its own battlefield," he said slowly, remembering her words from the cottage. "And you were trained for it. All those years of learning to be perfect, to say the right things, to navigate society. That wasn't useless training, Annalise. That was preparation. When we walk into Blackwater, when we face the Northern Lords and Geoffrey, I'll need you beside me. Not behind me. Beside me. Equal partners." "Equal partners," he agreed. Then he smiled. "Though I reserve the right to be better at swordplay. And I reserve the right to be better at not getting us killed by saying the wrong thing to important people." She smiled back. "Deal. Deal." They descended the hill and continued north. The miles passed. Annalise's feet hurt less each day. Her muscles grew stronger. Her hands developed calluses. She learned to sleep on the ground, to eat whatever they could find or catch, to move silently through the woods. She was transforming, becoming someone new. Someone she might actually like. On the 5th day, they saw it in the distance. A manor house, large and fortified, sitting on a hill. Smoke rose from its chimneys. Fields surrounded it, and Annalise could see workers bringing in the last of the harvest. "Northgate Manor," Alistair said. Relief colored his voice. "We made it." They approached carefully. Alistair was taking no chances, even this close to sanctuary. But as they neared the gates, a rider came galloping out. A man in his 50s, broad-shouldered, with iron-gray hair and a weathered face. He pulled up his horse, staring at Alistair. His face went pale. "Your Grace," he said, his voice shaking. "They said you were gone. They said you drowned." "I'm hard to kill, Robert," Alistair said. "May we come in?" Sir Robert dismounted and embraced him. "Thank God. Thank God you're alive." Then he looked at Annalise, taking in her torn dress, her muddy face, the knife at her belt. "And who is this?" "This," Alistair said, his hand finding Annalise, "is my wife, Annalise, Duchess of Blackwater." Sir Robert's eyebrows rose. You married? When? How? It's a long story. One best told inside, with food and wine and a fire. Alistair squeezed Annalise's hand. And Robert, we're going to need your help. Because I'm not staying dead. I'm going to reclaim everything Geoffrey stole. And I'm going to make him pay for trying to murder me. Sir Robert's face split into a fierce grin. Now that's the Duke I remember. Come in, both of you. Let's get you warm and fed. And then let's plan how to take back your birthright. He looked at Annalise with new respect. Any woman who can keep up with Alistair Beaumont on a forced march is someone I want on our side. Welcome to Northgate, Your Grace. As they walked through the gates, Annalise felt something shift inside her. She had left the cottage as a confused, angry woman who'd been lied to and used. She arrived at Northgate as someone different. Stronger, clearer, ready for whatever came next. The journey had changed her. Now the real battle would begin. The great hall of Northgate Manor blazed with firelight as maps sprawled across ancient oak tables. Annalise stood at the threshold, watching a man she barely recognized. This was not Liam the stonemason. Duke Alistair Beaumont commanded the room with effortless authority, his calloused hands now gesturing over battle plans, his voice cutting through debate like a blade. Knights and advisors leaned forward, hanging on his every word. The transformation was complete and devastating. Geoffrey has fortified Blackwater with 50 mercenaries, Sir Robert reported, his weathered face grim. The northern lords believe you dead, Your Grace. He's hosting a feast in 3 days to consolidate his claim. Then we have 3 days to shatter that illusion, Alistair said, his finger tracing a route on the map. The truth is our greatest weapon. Thomas Paine witnessed the attack on the Cliff Road. His testimony will expose Geoffrey's treachery before the assembled lords. And if they don't believe him? Another knight challenged. Alistair's smile was cold. Then I'll present more convincing evidence. His hand moved to the sword at his hip, the Beaumont blade, no longer hidden. Annalise's breath caught. This was the man who'd killed 3 assassins without breaking stride. This was the Duke who'd survived his cousin's murder attempt through sheer cunning and will. This was the man she'd watched struggle to light a cottage fire just weeks ago. The meeting stretched past midnight. Strategy layered upon contingency, every detail scrutinized. Annalise remained silent, absorbing the brutal calculus of power and survival. When the last advisor departed, Alistair finally looked at her, truly looked at her, for the first time since they'd arrived. Exhaustion lined his face, but something else flickered in his eyes. Concern. Guilt. You should retire, he said quietly. The servants have prepared the east chamber for you. And where will you be? Here. Planning. Annalise crossed her arms. Planning what, exactly? A glorious assault on the castle where you'll likely die. If necessary. How convenient. Her voice sharpened. You married me to hide your identity. Now you'll discard me the moment I'm inconvenient to your grand battle. He turned fully to face her, jaw tight. I'm trying to protect you. By leaving me behind? Annalise moved closer, her heart hammering but her voice steady. Geoffrey tried to murder you once already. Do you think he'll let your widow live peacefully after you're dead? Do you think he'll simply forget about the woman who knows his secrets? Alistair's expression flickered. She'd struck true. Your safest option is Northgate, he said firmly. Sir Robert will. Sir Robert will defend an empty manor while I cower in luxury? Annalise laughed bitterly. I've already lived that life, Alistair. The gilded cage. The protected ignorance. It nearly destroyed me. This is different. This is war. And I've already survived 3 assassins at our cottage door. She stepped closer still, close enough to see the storm in his eyes. Or have you forgotten I was there? That I saw what you became to keep us alive. His hands clenched at his sides. You don't understand what you're asking. Don't I? Annalai's voice dropped, intimate and fierce. You taught me to survive in the wilderness. To build fires, to track paths, to endure cold and hunger. Did you think those were merely pastoral skills? Or were you preparing me for exactly this moment? Silence stretched between them, charged and dangerous. There's a difference between surviving the wilderness and infiltrating a hostile castle, Alistair said finally. You're right. The wilderness is honest about its dangers. Annalise held his gaze. A drawing room, however, is its own battlefield. And that, Your Grace, is terrain where I outrank you. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, perhaps even respect. Geoffrey's hosting Northern Lords, she continued, her strategic mind racing. Men who knew your father, who remember the Beaumont line. They'll be watching for weakness, for any sign this feast is merely theater. If you burst in with swords drawn, you'll look like an attacker, a usurper. They'll see a violent claimant, not a rightful duke. Alistair's eyes narrowed, tracking her logic. But if I arrive first? Annalai's pulse quickened with the audacity of it. If the Duchess of Blackwater enters her own hall, regal and composed, before you reveal yourself, then Geoffrey becomes the interloper, the pretender, the man occupying another's home. It's too dangerous. Everything is dangerous now. Annalai's voice softened, but her resolve remained steel. You gave me no choice in becoming your wife. Don't take away my choice in being your duchess. The words hung between them, weighted with everything unspoken, the deception, the protection, the strange intimacy forged in their wilderness journey. Alistair studied her for a long moment, seeing past the lady of the manor to the woman who'd learned to gut fish with bleeding fingers, who'd marched through freezing rain without complaint, who'd faced down assassins with nothing but fierce determination in her eyes. Finally, he nodded slowly. If you do this, you follow my lead. Precisely. No improvisation. I'm a lady of noble birth, raised for performance and propriety, Annalise said with the ghost of a smile. Following elaborate social protocols is the only thing I was ever properly trained for. This isn't a garden party. No, it's theater. She straightened her shoulders, and for the first time since entering this martial hall, she looked every inch a duchess. And I've been playing roles my entire life. The difference is, this time I choose my part. Alistair's expression remained carefully neutral, but something in his eyes, warmth, perhaps, or the beginning of genuine partnership, made Annalaise's breath catch. Tomorrow we prepare, he said. Sir Robert will brief you on the castle layout. You'll need to know every passage, every exit. And the plan. We use the southern passage, servants' entrance, rarely guarded. It leads directly to the old wing where I can access my chambers without detection. His finger traced the route on the map. You'll enter through the main hall during the feast. All eyes will be on you, while you move into position. Precisely. He met her gaze. The moment you make your presence known, Geoffrey will panic. He'll be torn between maintaining composure before his guests and dealing with an impossible situation. That's when I emerge. Annalaise's strategic mind mapped the sequence. The lords will see him rattled, vulnerable. Then you appear, alive, rightful, composed. The contrast will be devastating. If it works. It will work. Annalise surprised herself with her own certainty. Because Geoffrey underestimated me once already. He saw a pawn in his game, a convenient cover for your false death. He never imagined the pawn might become a queen. Alistair's lips quirked, almost a smile, but not quite. Chess metaphors from a duchess. My father would approve. Did he teach you? Every evening after lessons. The memory softened Alistair's features briefly. He said a good ruler must think 3 moves ahead. Geoffrey only thinks 1 move ahead, his own advancement. It makes him predictable. And dangerous. Yes. The softness vanished. Which is why I need to know you understand the risk. If this fails, if Geoffrey moves faster than anticipated, you'll be trapped in that hall with hostile forces between us. I might not reach you in time. Annalise had spent weeks watching this man, learning his tells, his careful movements, the way he calculated every risk before acting. She'd seen the warrior emerge from the stonemason's disguise. She'd watched him protect her with a ferocity that still made her breath catch. You'll reach me, she said quietly. I know you will. The certainty in her voice seemed to undo something in him. His carefully maintained distance wavered, and for just a moment, he looked at her the way he had during that cold rainy night in the wilderness, like she was something precious he'd never expected to find. Then the moment passed, and the Duke returned. Get some rest, he said, his tone formal once more. Tomorrow will be grueling. Annalise nodded and turned toward the door. But at the threshold, she paused. Alistair. He looked up from the maps, surprise flickering at her use of his given name. Thank you for not shutting me out. She held his gaze. I know you're accustomed to bearing burdens alone. But you don't have to. Not anymore. Before he could respond, she slipped through the door, leaving him alone with his maps and his thoughts. But as Annalise walked the cold corridors toward her chamber, she realized something had fundamentally shifted. This was no longer a marriage of convenience or camouflage. This was partnership. Dangerous, uncertain, forged in deception and adversity, but real. And tomorrow, she would prove herself worthy of it. The next 2 days blurred with preparation. Sir Robert drilled her on castle layouts until she could navigate Blackwater blindfolded. Servants altered a gown in Beaumont blue, the ducal color, with expert speed. Annalise practiced her entrance, her posture, every gesture calculated for maximum impact. Alistair watched from the shadows, occasionally offering corrections with the precision of a man who understood theater as strategy. Slower, he'd say. Make them wait. Anticipation is a weapon. Head higher. You're not asking permission to exist. Good. Now make them believe you've always been Duchess. Make them forget you were ever anything else. On the 3rd morning, they departed before dawn. A small group, Alistair, Annalise, Sir Robert, and 4 trusted knights, moved swiftly through forests she and Alistair had traversed weeks before as refugees. Now they traveled as invaders, reclaiming stolen ground. The irony wasn't lost on Annalise. They reached Blackwater's borders by midday, circling wide to approach from the south. The castle rose against grey skies, its stone walls both familiar and foreign. Annalise had never seen the Beaumont seat before, yet it called to something in her blood now, a claim she hadn't asked for but couldn't deny. There, Alistair murmured, pointing to a dense section of forest. The old servants' passage. It hasn't been used in years, but I'd wager Geoffrey doesn't even know it exists. They dismounted and moved on foot through underbrush. The passage entrance was exactly where Alistair remembered, hidden behind overgrown ivy, the wooden door swollen with age and moisture. Sir Robert and 2 knights forced it open with careful, quiet effort. Beyond lay darkness. Alistair produced a shuttered lantern, its light revealing a narrow tunnel carved through rock. The air smelled of damp earth and forgotten years. This leads directly to the old wing, Alistair whispered. Annalise, you'll continue to the main courtyard entrance with Sir Robert. Wait for the feast to reach its height. You'll hear the music and revelry. That's when you enter. Annalise nodded, her heart hammering against her ribs. Alistair's hand found hers in the darkness, his grip firm and warm. Remember, slow, regal, unshakable. You are the Duchess. You belong there. Geoffrey is the intruder. I know. And if anything goes wrong, it won't. His thumb brushed across her knuckles, a gesture so tender it nearly undid her composure. You're certain about this? Annalise met his eyes in the dim lantern light. I've never been more certain of anything. For a heartbeat, she thought he might kiss her. The tension between them pulled taut, charged with everything they'd survived together, everything they hadn't yet said. Instead, he released her hand and turned toward the tunnel's depths. Tonight, then, he said quietly, we take back what's ours. Then he vanished into the darkness, 3 nights following like shadows. Sir Robert touched Annalise's shoulder. Come, Your Grace. We have a grand entrance to prepare. Annalise nodded, but her eyes remained fixed on the tunnel where Alistair had disappeared. Every eye in the hall was about to turn to her. But only one pair of eyes truly mattered. And she intended to make him proud. The great hall of Blackwater Castle blazed with light and laughter. Annalise stood in the shadowed corridor beyond the massive oak doors, her heart hammering against her ribs. Through the gaps, she glimpsed the scene within. Hundreds of candles, long tables laden with roasted meats and wine, northern lords in their finest velvets gathered to celebrate. To celebrate a lie. Sir Robert stood beside her, his weathered face grave. The music has reached its peak, Your Grace. The wine flows freely. They're distracted. Annalise smoothed the Beaumont blue gown one final time. The fabric whispered against her skin, rich and heavy. A duchess's gown. Her gown now, though she'd never imagined wearing it. Around her throat hung the Beaumont pearls, an heirloom Sir Robert had produced that morning with solemn ceremony. These belonged to the late Duchess, he'd said. They're yours now. The weight of them felt like a claim. Like destiny. Alistair is in position, she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. In his chambers, with clear sight of the hall through the gallery passage. The moment you enter, he'll know. Sir Robert's eyes held fierce pride. You can still withdraw, my lady. This plan is dangerous. Everything is dangerous now. Annalise squared her shoulders. And I'm done being protected from my own life. Through the doors, she heard Geoffrey's voice rise above the din. Smooth, confident, playing the gracious host. The false duke, holding court in another man's hall. Her fury crystallized into something cold and sharp. Open the doors, she commanded. Sir Robert hesitated only a heartbeat, then nodded to the guards. Men loyal to the true Beaumont line, positioned specifically for this moment. The massive doors swung inward. Conversations didn't cease immediately. The hall was too large, too raucous with wine and celebration. But silence spread like ripples in water, starting with those nearest the entrance, then cascading through the crowd as heads turned, as nobles nudged their neighbors, as the impossible sight registered. A woman stood in the doorway, backlit by corridor torches. Regal, composed, unmistakably noble, wearing Beaumont blue and pearls. Annalise stepped forward, and the last conversations died. The musicians faltered, their instruments trailing into discordant quiet. 200 faces turned toward her, expressions ranging from confusion to shock to dawning recognition. She walked slowly, as Alistair had taught her. Make them wait. Make them see. Her footsteps echoed against stone floors, the only sound in the cavernous space. She kept her gaze forward, chin high, every gesture deliberate. Not a woman seeking permission. A duchess reclaiming her hall. At the high table, Geoffrey had frozen mid-gesture, wine cup halfway to his lips. His face had gone pale, then flushed with something between rage and panic. Annalise walked the full length of the hall, letting the silence build, letting every lord see the Beaumont colors on her body, the ancestral pearls at her throat. Letting them wonder. Finally, She reached the dais where Geoffrey sat in the Duke's chair, Alastair's chair. She smiled, cold and precise. "How peculiar," Annalise said, her voice carrying through the silent hall, "to host a feast without inviting the rightful Duchess of Blackwater." The collective gasp was audible. Lords shifted, glancing at each other, at Geoffrey, at this impossible woman who'd materialized from nowhere. Geoffrey set down his cup with shaking hands. You are an impostor." His voice cracked slightly. "Some charlatan seeking to." "Am I?" Annalise's eyebrow arched. "How fascinating. Then perhaps you can explain why I wear the Beaumont pearls, which have been in the ducal family for 6 generations. Or why Sir Robert Ashford, loyal retainer to the Beaumont line for 40 years, escorted me here tonight." She gestured, and Sir Robert stepped into view from the entrance. His presence, solid, known, respected, sent another ripple through the assembly. Geoffrey's face darkened. A conspiracy, then. Traitors and pretenders seeking to. To what? Annalise interrupted, her voice sharp as broken glass. To prevent a murderer from stealing a dukedom? The word hung in the air like an executioner's blade. "You dare." Geoffrey started to rise. "I dare many things." Annalise's voice never wavered. "I dare to speak truth before assembled lords. I dare to name you for what you are, Geoffrey Beaumont. Kinslayer. Usurper. The man who tried to murder his own cousin on the cliff road and claim his title." Madness. Geoffrey's voice rose, desperate now. "The Duke is dead, drowned in the storm. Every man here knows this." "Do they?" Annalise turned to face the assembly, her performance flawless. "Or do they know only what you told them? How convenient that the Duke died with no witnesses save yourself. How fortunate for you that his body was never recovered." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Lords leaning toward each other, doubt creeping across faces. "She speaks lies." Geoffrey's composure cracked further. "Guards, seize this woman for what?" The new voice came from the shadows of the gallery above. "For being my wife?" Every head snapped upward. Alastair emerged from the darkness like a ghost made flesh. He stood in the gallery archway, backlit by torches, his presence commanding absolute attention. Not dressed as a stonemason now. He wore the Beaumont colors, the ducal seal gleaming at his throat, the ancestral sword at his hip. Every inch a duke. Alive. Undeniable. The silence that followed was absolute. No breath, no movement. 200 people frozen in collective shock. Geoffrey's face drained of all color. "No. No, you died. You're dead." Alastair's voice carried through the hall with quiet, lethal precision. He began descending the gallery stairs, each footfall deliberate. "Yes, you tried very hard to ensure that, didn't you, cousin?" He reached the main floor and crossed toward the high table, the crowd parting before him like water. Lords who'd been celebrating Geoffrey's ascension now stared at the impossible. The rightful Duke returned from the grave. Alastair's eyes never left Geoffrey's face. "Tell them what happened on the cliff road, Geoffrey. Tell them how you hired 3 men to stage a robbery. How you watched them strike me down and throw my body into the ravine." Lies. Geoffrey's voice was shrill now, all pretense of authority shattered. This is some trick." No trick." Alastair stopped at the base of the dais, his presence dwarfing his cousin despite their similar heights. "I survived. Crawled from that ravine. Recovered in hiding while you spread word of my death and claimed my title." He turned to address the assembly, his voice ringing with command. "Lords of the North, you've been deceived. The feast you attend is built on murder and lies. But I have proof." He gestured, and 2 guards emerged from the side entrance, escorting a trembling man in common clothes. Analyze recognized him from the plan. Thomas Paine, the witness. This man was on the cliff road that day, Alastair continued. He saw the attack. He saw Geoffrey signal the assassins. He watched them throw me into the ravine while my cousin stood by and did nothing. Thomas Paine nodded frantically. Every word truth, Lords. I saw it all. Hid in the trees, terrified. Watched the Duke fall and his own kin walk away like it was nothing. The murmurs grew louder now. Lords rising from their seats, voices overlapping in shock and anger. Geoffrey's eyes darted wildly, seeking escape, finding none. His hand moved toward his belt, toward the dagger there. Don't. Alastair's voice was soft but carried the promise of violence. But Geoffrey was beyond reason, beyond calculation. In his desperation, he lunged, not at Alastair, but at Analyze. She saw the blade flash, heard Alastair's shout. Then Geoffrey crashed backward, Alastair's hand locked around his wrist, the dagger clattering across stone. You tried to kill me once, Alastair said, his voice deadly calm even as he forced Geoffrey down. I won't let you touch her. Geoffrey writhed, then wrenched free, stumbling backward and drawing his sword in one desperate motion. Guards! To me. Kill the pretender. But no guards moved. The men at the doors remained still, their loyalty already pledged elsewhere. Geoffrey's face twisted with rage and fear. He raised his blade toward Alastair. Then I'll finish what I started. Steel sang as Alastair drew the Beaumont's sword. The duel was swift and brutal. Geoffrey attacked with desperate fury, all technique abandoned. Alastair met each strike with practiced precision. The warrior Analyze had glimpsed in their cottage, now fully revealed. This was no stonemason. This was a man trained from childhood in the deadly art of combat. Geoffrey's blade swung wild. Alastair sidestepped effortlessly, his counterstrike sending Geoffrey's sword spinning from his grip. Before Geoffrey could react, Alastair's blade was at his throat. Silence crashed over the hall. Yield, Alastair commanded, his voice carrying to every corner. Geoffrey trembled, sweat streaming down his face. All his schemes collapsed into this single moment of defeat. I yield, he whispered. Alastair didn't lower the blade. Lords of the North, you've witnessed this man's treachery. His attempt to murder his rightful duke. His lies and usurpation. His eyes swept the assembly. What is the judgment for kinslaying and treason? Death, came the unified response. The northern lords stood now, their verdict absolute. But Alastair stepped back, lowering his sword. Then let it be recorded that Geoffrey Beaumont attempted murder and fraud. Let him be seized and tried properly before the king's justice. I'll not stain this hall with his blood tonight. He nodded to Sir Robert, who moved forward with guards to take Geoffrey into custody. As they dragged the broken man away, Geoffrey's eyes found Analyze. You, he spat. You were supposed to be nothing. A convenient pawn. Analyze met his gaze without flinching. Perhaps you should have paid more attention to pawns, Geoffrey. In chess, they're the pieces that become queens. Then he was gone, and the hall erupted. Lords surged forward, some to pledge fealty, others to demand explanations, all wanting to touch the Duke who'd returned from death. The noise built like a wave, shock transforming into chaotic celebration. But Alastair's eyes sought only one person. He crossed to where Analyze stood, still on the dais, still regal despite the violence that had just unfolded. Their gazes locked, and the hall's chaos faded into background noise. It's over, he said quietly, reaching up to cup her face with hands that still trembled slightly from combat. Analyze's breath caught. No. His expression flickered with concern. It's just beginning, she finished, her voice soft but certain. Then Alastair pulled her into a kiss that stole every thought from her mind. This kiss was nothing like their wedding, No hesitation, no careful distance. This was fire and relief and everything they'd survived together pouring into a single moment. His hands tangled in her hair, heedless of propriety. Her fingers clutched his shoulders, holding on like he might vanish again. The hall erupted in deafening approval. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Alistair's forehead rested against hers. "My fierce Duchess," he murmured. "You were magnificent." Annalaise's laugh was shaky but genuine. "I had an excellent teacher in strategy. And I had an unexpected partner in courage." The moment stretched between them, intimate despite hundreds of witnesses. Then Sir Robert's voice cut through, formal and commanding. "My lords, the Duke of Blackwater has returned. Long may he reign." The hall took up the cry, voices joining in traditional allegiance. But Annalise barely heard them. Because in Alistair's eyes, she saw something that made her heart stop and restart. Not gratitude. Not relief. Recognition. Partnership. The beginning of something neither had expected but both desperately wanted. But the real revelation was yet to come. The hall's thunderous approval washed over them like a wave, but Annalise barely heard it. All she could feel was Alistair's hands still cradling her face, his breath warm against her lips, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that made the world narrow to just the two of them. "Your Grace." Sir Robert's voice broke through again, this time closer. "The lords await your address." Alistair released her slowly, reluctantly, his fingers trailing across her jaw before falling away. He turned to face the assembly, his hand finding hers and holding firm. "United. Equal. Together. Lords of the North." Alistair's voice rang clear and strong. "You've witnessed tonight a truth I kept hidden for survival. But there's another truth you must know." He raised their joined hands. "This woman, Annalise Hartley, now Annalise Beaumont, is not merely a political convenience. She is my wife in truth. My Duchess. And she has earned that title through courage that surpasses any I've witnessed." The lords murmured approval, but Annalise felt heat rise to her cheeks. This public declaration, this acknowledgement, it was more than she'd ever expected from their arrangement. "She faced assassins at my side," Alistair continued. "Survived wilderness that would break most men. Walked into this hostile hall knowing she might die, because she refused to let me face this battle alone." His thumb brushed across her knuckles. "I am Duke by birth. But she is Duchess by her own fierce merit." The applause thundered again, but Annalise's vision blurred with sudden tears. In a world that had valued her only as property to be sold, as camouflage to be used, here stood a man who saw her, truly saw her. Sir Robert approached bearing a velvet cushion, and on it rested a circlet of silver worked with sapphires, the Duchess's coronet. Annalise's breath caught. "This belonged to my mother," Alistair said softly, lifting the coronet. "She was the finest woman I ever knew. Strong, compassionate, fierce when necessary." He met Annalise's eyes. "She would have liked you very much." Before Annalise could respond, he placed the coronet upon her head with gentle precision. The weight settled, not heavy, but present. A crown. Her crown. Then Alistair did something that sent gasps rippling through the assembly. He dropped to one knee before her. "Your Grace," he said formally, but his eyes held warmth that made her heart race. "I pledge you my loyalty, my protection, and my partnership. From this day until my last." For a heartbeat, Annalise couldn't breathe. Then she understood. He was giving her what their wedding had lacked. Choice. Public acknowledgement. True partnership offered freely, not forced by circumstance. "Rise, Your Grace," she said softly, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. "I accept your pledge, and offer mine in return, loyalty, courage, and truth. Always." He stood, And this time when he kissed her, it was tender. A promise rather than passion. Behind them, the northern lords began to kneel. First one, then another, then the entire assembly sinking down in waves of fealty. Long live the Duke of Blackwater! Long live the Duchess! Annalise, who'd been sold to pay her father's debts mere months ago, now stood crowned before kneeling lords. The girl who'd thought her life ruined by marriage to a stonemason now commanded the allegiance of the North's most powerful men. The transformation was complete. But as the celebration continued, as wine flowed and music resumed, Annalise's mind returned to a moment that had haunted her for weeks. Their wedding night. The feast gradually wound down as midnight approached. Lords found chambers prepared for them, servants bustled with practiced efficiency, and Alastair fielded endless questions and pledges. Through it all, his hand kept finding hers, a touch, a squeeze, a silent communication that they were in this together. Finally, Sir Robert appeared at Alastair's elbow. "Your Grace, the ducal chambers have been prepared. For both of you." His weathered face held the ghost of a knowing smile. Alastair nodded, then turned to Annalise. "Are you ready to retire?" The question held layers. After the chaos, the violence, the public declarations, were they ready to be alone together? To face whatever came next without an audience? "Yes," Annalise said simply. They walked through corridors she'd memorized from Sir Robert's briefings, but now she saw them properly. Her home, not a battlefield. Portraits of Beaumont ancestors lined the walls, faces stern and noble. Soon her own portrait would hang here too. The ducal chambers were magnificent, a vast suite overlooking the northern forests, with a bed large enough to lose herself in and a fireplace that blazed with welcoming warmth. Servants had laid out nightclothes and wine, then vanished with discreet efficiency. The door closed behind them. Suddenly, the enormity of everything crashed over Annalise. The danger, the performance, the coronation, it had all felt like a dream, a play she was acting in. But this was real. The coronet on her head was real. The man standing across the room, carefully unfastening his sword belt, was real. Her husband. Her duke. The man she'd thought she knew, then hadn't known at all, and was only now beginning to truly understand. "You were incredible tonight," Alastair said, setting his sword aside. "The way you commanded that hall. Annalise, you were born for this." "I was terrified," she admitted. "I know. I could see it in the set of your shoulders, the slight tremor in your hands." He crossed toward her. "But you did it anyway. That's what courage is, not the absence of fear, but action despite it." He reached up carefully, gently removing the coronet from her head and setting it on the dresser with reverent care. His fingers brushed through her hair, releasing pins, letting dark waves cascade over her shoulders. The intimacy of the gesture stole her breath. "There's something I need to tell you," Annalise said suddenly. "Something I need to understand." Alastair's hands stilled. "What is it?" She met his eyes, gathering her courage. "Our wedding night. At the cottage. You sent me to bed alone. You barely looked at me. I thought." Her voice wavered. "I thought you found me lacking. Undesirable. That even a marriage born of necessity didn't warrant. That you couldn't even pretend to want me." Pain flashed across Alastair's face. "God. Annalise. No. That's not." He stepped back, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "That's not what happened at all." "Then explain it to me." She moved closer, needing to understand. "Because that rejection has haunted me. Made me feel like I was so far beneath you that even touch was too much to ask." Alastair closed his eyes briefly, then opened them with visible effort. "You want the truth? The whole truth? Always?" He took a breath, and when he spoke, his voice was raw with emotion. "That night, you stood before me in borrowed nightclothes, trembling with fear and exhaustion. You'd been sold to pay debts, married to a stranger you believed was a common laborer, dragged to a cottage in the wilderness. Everything you'd known was stripped away. Annalise remembered the humiliation, the terror, the bone-deep exhaustion. And I looked at you, Alistair continued, his voice dropping lower. And I wanted you so badly I could barely breathe. You were beautiful and brave and utterly lost. And I was lying to you about everything. My name, my title, my reasons for marrying you. I was using you as camouflage while assassins hunted me. His hands clenched at his sides. If I'd touched you that night, if I'd claimed the rights a husband expects, it would have been another violation. Another thing taken from you without your choice. And I couldn't do that. I couldn't take and take and take while giving you nothing but lies. Annalise's heart hammered against her ribs. So you sent me away. I sent you away because I was trying to be honorable in a dishonorable situation. His laugh was bitter. I thought if I kept distance, kept things purely practical, I could protect you from the worst of this. Protect you from my enemies. Protect you from myself. From yourself. From falling in love with you. The words dropped like stones into still water, which I was already doing, even then. Even that first night, watching you try so hard to be brave. It terrified me. Annalise's breath stopped. Emotional attachment creates vulnerability, Alistair continued, his voice rough. If my enemies knew I cared for you, truly cared, you'd become a target. The best way to protect you was to keep you at arm's length. Make it seem like our marriage was purely transactional. Let you believe I didn't want you. He met her eyes, and the naked emotion there made her knees weak. But God, Annalise, I wanted you. Every moment. Every day in that cottage, watching you struggle and adapt and refuse to break. Every night lying awake on the floor, knowing you were just steps away. The wilderness journey when you fell asleep against me, and I thought my heart would stop from the perfection of it. Tears spilled down Annalise's cheeks. You never said. Because saying it would make it real. Would make you something precious I had to protect at all costs. Would turn you from a convenient arrangement into the most important thing in my world. His voice cracked. And I couldn't afford that. Not while Geoffrey still hunted me. Not while danger stalked every shadow. Annalise crossed the space between them in 3 quick steps, her hands framing his face. You idiot. He blinked. What? You noble, self-sacrificing idiot. Fresh tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling. You thought you were protecting me by pushing me away. But all you did was make me fall in love with a man who wouldn't let himself love me back. Alistair's expression shattered into something between joy and anguish. Annalise. That wedding night rejection? She held his gaze fiercely. I understand now. It wasn't because I was beneath you. It was because I mattered too much. You gave me the only protection you could. Distance. Space. Time to adapt without the added complication of intimacy. Yes. The word came out hoarse. The most desired duke in England rejected his own wife, Annalise continued, her voice soft with wonder. Not because he didn't want her, but because he wanted her too much. Because he was already falling in love and couldn't afford the vulnerability. I'm sorry, Alistair whispered. I'm so sorry I made you feel unwanted. You're the most magnificent woman I've ever known. Strong and fierce and brilliant. That night at the cottage, if I'd touched you, I would have fallen completely. And I couldn't risk you that way. Not when death followed me. Annalise understood now. Truly understood. The careful distance hadn't been rejection. It had been the most profound form of respect. He'd honored her autonomy when he could have taken everything. He'd protected her heart even while claiming her hand. He'd loved her by letting her believe he didn't. But the danger's past now, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Jeffrey is imprisoned. The assassins are dead or fled. There's no reason for distance anymore. Alistair's hands came up to cover hers where they still cupped his face. No, he agreed, his voice rough with emotion. No more distance. No more lies. No more protection through pushing you away. Good. Annalise rose onto her toes, bringing their faces inches apart. Because I'm done being protected from what I want. And I want you, Alistair. Not the Duke. Not the stonemason. You. The man who taught me to build fires and gut fish. The man who killed to keep me safe. The man who crowned me tonight and called me magnificent. Annalise. Her name on his lips was prayer and plea together. This is our real wedding night, she whispered against his mouth. No lies. No fear. Just us. Finally us. When their lips met, it was nothing like the cottage. Nothing like the public kisses in the hall. This was coming home. Alistair's hands slid into her hair, cradling her head like she was something infinitely precious. Annalise's fingers clutched his shoulders, holding on as the kiss deepened, as months of denial and distance and desperate wanting poured between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Alistair rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said simply. I've loved you since you marched into that cottage and refused to let poverty break your spirit. I've loved you through every day of lies and distance. And I'll love you for every day we have left. I love you too, Annalise whispered. My Duke. My partner. My choice. The fire crackled. Outside, Blackwater Castle settled into peaceful night, no longer under siege, no longer a battlefield. Just home. And in the ducal chambers, the Duke and Duchess of Blackwater finally claimed the wedding night they should have had, not born of necessity or camouflage or desperate survival, but of love freely given and joyfully received. 3 months later. Sunlight streamed through the library windows of Blackwater Castle, warming the polished floors and illuminating countless books lining the walls. Annalise sat at the reading table, correspondence spread before her, requests from northern lords, invitations to court, her own careful administration of ducal estates. She'd discovered a talent for governance. What her father had seen as useless feminine accomplishment, careful attention to detail, understanding of social dynamics, ability to read what people truly meant beneath polite words, translated remarkably well to managing a dukedom. The door opened, and Alistair entered carrying a stack of leather-bound volumes. Stone dust still clung to his sleeves. Annalise smiled. Have you been in the quarry again? The new wing needs foundation work. I wanted to supervise the measurements personally. He set the books down and crossed to her, pressing a kiss to her temple. Old habits. The Duke of Blackwater, covered in stone dust like a common laborer, Annalise teased. The Duke of Blackwater who remembers what real work feels like, he corrected, his hands resting on her shoulders. I'll never forget those months, Annalise. They taught me more about strength and survival than all my years of privilege. She reached up to cover his hand with hers. Do you ever regret it? Marrying me to survive. Alistair circled the chair to face her, his expression serious. Do you know what I regret? What? That I didn't trust you with the truth sooner. That I let you believe you were merely convenient when you were already becoming essential. He knelt before her chair, bringing them eye to eye. But regret marrying you? Never. That was the only good decision in the entire ordeal. Annalise's throat tightened with emotion, even though it started as camouflage. Especially because it started that way. His thumb brushed her cheek. Because it means I chose you before I knew you. And then I fell in love with exactly who you are. Fierce, brilliant, unbreakable. You were never camouflage, Annalise. You were always the prize I didn't deserve. She leaned forward, kissing him softly. We deserved each other. Two people thrown into impossible circumstances who found something real. Outside, Blackwater thrived under their joint governance. The northern lords respected their duke who'd survived assassination and their duchess who'd walked into hostile halls without flinching. The estate flourished. The people prospered. And in quiet moments like this, in sunlit libraries with stone dust on ducal sleeves, Annalise and Alastair remembered what they'd learned in that small cottage, that love forged in adversity's fires burned brighter than any born in comfort. She'd thought marriage to a stonemason would ruin her life. Instead, it had given her everything she never knew she needed. A partnership built on truth. Love earned through struggle. And the freedom to be exactly who she was meant to become. Not a lady trapped in gilded cages, but a duchess who'd chosen her throne and the man who shared it. Come to bed, Alastair murmured against her hair. Your correspondence can wait until morning. Annalise smiled, setting down her pen. Will you read to me? Latin poetry like you did in the cottage. Always. He pulled her to her feet, his arms circling her waist. Though I should warn you, my Latin has gotten rusty. I've been too busy kissing my wife to practice proper conjugation. Her laugh echoed through the library, warm and genuine and utterly free. Outside, night fell over Blackwater Castle. But inside, in chambers that had witnessed deception and danger and desperate gambles, the Duke and Duchess of Blackwater built their future. One truth, one choice, one fierce love at a time. If you loved this story of secrets, survival, and unexpected love, please like this video, subscribe for more historical romance tales, and comment below. What surprised you most? The Duke's true identity, the wedding night revelation, or Annalise's transformation into a fierce duchess? Let me know what you'd like to hear next.